Let's now source this in DOPS. So plus icon, source volume is density, target field is density. I'm going to use a maximum operation for this. And what you'll notice is that by default, you're not going to see any smoke in your scene. Let's go forward a few frames and I'll show you what I mean. So towards the beginning, you could see that, all right, well, we do have something showing up on the logs, but they really don't go anywhere. See that? So let's figure out why that's happening. If we go to the Pyro Solver, Flames tab, it's not this smoke section right here because this isn't active right now. Instead, what's happening is that on the Shape tab, we have dissipation checked by default. And at 0.5, that's saying take 50% of the density at every step. So if your density is 1, on the next step, it's going to be 0.5, and so on and so forth. So this is getting rid of density. And we also have the setting right here called clamp below. This clamp below is basically saying if the density value ever gets below this, just go ahead and cut it off. Get rid of it. The reason why it does this is so that you don't have lingering smoke values that cause the Pyro Solver to not adaptively trim off areas that it needs to. So if, let's say, we had a big missile trail going this way, and the smoke down here should be completely disappeared, well, if you have a density value that's hovering at like 0.000001, then you don't want the Pyro Solver, the sparse Pyro Solver, staying in that area. So that's why we have this clamp below to cut things off so that we can adaptively do stuff. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. The fix to this is very simple. Dissipation, let's say 0.05. Go really low on that. And as soon as you do that, this should help fix the problem a little bit. We're also not sourcing in very high values. So let's go to our volume source and change this from 1 to, let's say, 20. We'll go really high on that. And then once we do that, you'll notice that now we actually do have some smoke that's rising up like this. And 20 is probably a little bit too intense, honestly. So we'll dial that back. But I just want to show you what's going on there. Let's say maybe 5. You want a very light smoke coming off these logs. So let's see what 5 does. Okay, and it does just a little bit, and that's good. Maybe like 8. So we'll do 8 on that. And then let's go to our Pyro Solver, Flames tab, check on this emit smoke from the flames themselves. So this again is hitting the flames. On the left-hand side, this value is a flame value of 0.2. On the right-hand side, that's a flame value of 0.5. And this ramp represents where to add in the smoke. So right now, in between 0.2 and 0.5, that's where we're adding in the most smoke. So let's say maybe a flame range of 0.1, and then I think 0.5 is good for right now. I just turned up this emission amount to 8 so that we can really see it. We can always dial that back on the shader too, so keep that in mind. It's probably better to have a little bit more than you need as opposed to not enough with the smoke. Well, it's going to be too much. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Let's say maybe an emission amount of 4 right there. So we'll go 4 on that. Okay, so there we go. We have smoke. Now, you know what would really help the smoke out a lot is if we broke up those puffy, poofy looking shapes. And there's a lot of different methods to doing this, something that we'll probably get into a lot more when we get to Pyro 3. This becomes especially noticeable when you get big explosions. But I do want to just talk about the gas disturb microsolver. If you watched Pyro 1, you might have noticed that I used a gas disturbance node. But since Houdini 18, these options have changed. So gas disturb. Let's review what's going on here. Well, what we're trying to do, again, is break up these poofy shapes. And the way that we're going to do it is right in the areas that are on the outside, the leading edges of the smoke. I want to have a velocity that's pointing in all sorts of different directions, kind of like a noise applied to the velocity vectors. And I want to put those vectors right at the edge of these puffy things of smoke. By doing that, it'll break up that puffy shape, and that's how we're going to break this up. Now, the thing about this gas disturb microsolver, when you go to try to read about this, it can get pretty confusing at times. For instance, we have this mode, continuous, and we have this reference scale. If I just hover over the tooltip, this says the variance of the aggregated noise field over a region of this size will be equal to the strength when the mode is set to continuous. So, it gets really wordy really quickly. And I think for most of you, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So let me try to guide you through the woods here and give you a way of working with this gas disturb microsolver to at least get you going. And then on your own, you can try to study and, translate what is written about this in the user docs. So let me just show you how to use it first, and then you can take it from there. So what I'd recommend doing is, first of all, turning off this threshold range. We're going to control where this gas disturb happens by using the control field. This threshold range is trying to achieve the, where to apply this gas disturb, but it does it in a way that's not as straightforward, in my opinion, as this control field. So we're going to say a control field here is density. And when we say remap control field, we now have a ramp saying that at a value of 0 in the density, no effect from the gas disturb node. When we get up to 1, we're at full blast. So we now need to figure out what these values ought to be. Again, we're trying to get the edges of these smoke plumes. So on the smoke object, if we go to density, we check that, we go to this density tab, we can uncheck use smoke and instead say use plane. Now I'm going to turn off this multi-field here for a second. And when we do that, what you'll notice is that we now have just a little cutout here. And we can change these values so that we end up with something right about that. So notice how all these areas that are in blue and yellow, the areas that aren't red, these are exactly the areas that we're trying to pinpoint, right? We're trying to get these zones. So what I'll say is this: if we get to a value of 5, I don't want this gas disturb happening at all. So I'll go here and say, all right, if we go up to 5, this should not be happening at all. So that's 0. Now we don't want this happening when the value is purple either. So that's going to be at 0 right here. But as soon as we get to these very light, very bluish, kind of barely like blue purpley kind of colors, that's when we want to have this node at full blast. So we'll do something like that. And by doing this, we're now just affecting these areas that we can see visually, which is good. So now that we've controlled where this gas disturb is allowed to happen, if we go to the settings, change the strength down from 25 to something like 5 to start. 25 is going to be way too much. And let's now change our visualizations. So we'll bring back our multi-field and see where this gets us in the next video.